Hello, my name is Dr. Steve Stewart. I'm the pastor of New Horizon Community Church in Lancaster, South Carolina. And it is my wonderful privilege to be able to walk with you through a study of Old Testament survey. It's an exciting study. The Old Testament is such an exciting book and contains so much vital information for us to understand as we move into our own ministries and as God opens doors for us to share the wonder of His love and His grace and His mercy. It's vital for us to have an understanding of the Old Testament and how the Old Testament fits into the New Testament and how the New Testament in many ways is a completion of the Old Testament. So I'm excited to begin this journey with you. Our textbook is entitled Encountering the Old Testament, and I would suggest that before you begin doing anything is that you just familiarize yourself with the textbook itself. I would suggest that you especially look on page 17, the note of the authors to the student. It gives some helpful information on how you can best use this book and get the most out of your study of Old Testament survey through this particular textbook. This textbook is filled with information that will be helpful to you in years to come as you begin to see how the Old Testament fits together and how the plan of God is laid out for us in these different books of the Old Testament. Our study will begin with an overview of why it is important to study the Old Testament. Some people would even question why it's important for us today, in this day and age, to spend time studying the concepts and the principles and precepts laid down for us in the Old Testament. Zola Levitt, a converted Jew who is now with the Lord, used to say that the Bible is a book with the answers in the back. And of course, his reference there meant that being a Jew, particularly, he was so familiar with the Old Testament, and he came to realize after he accepted Christ as his own Savior that there's so many things in the New Testament that you really can't fully understand without an understanding of the Old Testament. And so it is vital for us to have a broad understanding of the Old Testament books and how they fit together. Of course, an Old Testament survey is not looking at any particular book or any particular passage of any book in detail. It's simply looking at the broad strokes of the author in presenting the material in the book that he wrote. We'll be looking at the broad strokes as we have an Old Testament survey. We'll look for things such as how that book is laid out, the major points of emphasis that are given in that particular book. And then as we begin moving toward the end of the Old Testament, we'll begin to see how those books of the Old Testament really do fit together and how God in His grace and mercy has given us this progressive self-revelation so that we might know Him intimately, that we might know Him completely, that we might know Him fully. And of course, this will enhance our understanding of New Testament studies as we move from the Old Testament into the New Testament in later studies. Our week-by-week study of the Old Testament survey is going to be divided up into 3 different assignments. All the assignments are taken directly out of the textbook. In your first assignment, you'll be given a certain number of pages to read in the textbook, and then you'll be given an assignment to answer some of the study questions at the end of the chapters that we've read for that week. Your second assignment for each week will be a list of definition terms that I'll ask you to define, and then the third assignment is looking on the first page of each chapter, you'll find some objectives that the authors have laid out, and I've taken some of those objectives and given them to you for further study, so that the third assignment for each week will be looking at those objectives in a little more detail and you giving me your response to those objectives. I'm really excited about beginning this journey with you. A study of the Old Testament is an exciting study, a study that is well worth your time and effort. And I encourage you in all of your studies, not just the Old Testament, but in all of your studies that you encounter at Fruitland, I encourage you to do as Paul said. Paul said that we're to do all things to the glory of God. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it all to the glory of God. So I would suggest that first and foremost, you commit yourself to doing all of your studies as if you were going to give these assignments directly to God Himself. And you know God deserves your best. And so I just pray that you will give each class, each course that you take, your very best effort. And you will glean more from it as you give more to it. So again, I'm excited to begin this journey with you. I'm excited to take it. I'm excited to walk alongside with you. Anytime you have any questions, you can call me. My phone number, my email address is on the syllabus, and I would encourage you to call me. I would encourage you to send me emails. I would encourage you to stay in contact with me, and we will do our best to share with one another in a learning experience that will enhance your study of the Old Testament and truly make these Old Testament books come to life in your studies. God bless you as you begin. So let's start this journey together.